My name is Jennifer McClendon, and I am with the NOCC as our Education and Mission Programs Manager. And I'm delighted to be here this evening with you all. So thank you so much for joining us. I think it's going to be a really exciting, very fun topic. I guess you could say, sleep, but I think it will be a fun topic to talk about. But we're so excited for tonight's program, Help, I Can't Sleep, Tips on How to Feel Better. But before we go any further, I just wanted to mention a few things that this entire digital learning series is really designed to help you, survivors and caregivers, with the self-care strategies that you need to help you through this ovarian cancer journey. And it's supported by donors and partners dedicated to us that are helping us provide these learning opportunities for our teal community. So just a few housekeeping items. If you aren't on mute and you're just joining us, if you don't mind placing yourself on mute, that would be great. And then if you have a question at any time during the discussion tonight, feel free to put that into the chat, and we will also have time at the end for questions, whether you can speak your question aloud to us, or you can put that in the chat. And we are also recording today's session, but we just want you to know that your privacy is protected. We will stop the recording at the time of the question so that if you did want to speak aloud, you can feel free to do so without any hesitation. So let's get to our program this evening. So whether you are going through treatment currently, whether you're going through menopause, taking certain medications, sometimes just can't get thoughts and fears out of your head keeps spinning, getting a good night's sleep, which I know we can probably all relate to, can sometimes be very difficult. So our speaker this evening, Laura, who we are joined by, is going to discuss the importance of sleep and why we need to find ways to put our bodies to sleep more calmly and how to wake them up more soundly. So we're excited to have Laura. She is a wife, a mother, a survivor of an aggressive form of blood cancer, acute myeloid leukemia. And she went through as well herself chemotherapy, full body radiation, and also a stem cell transplant. So she's been through it along with you guys. But she was lucky enough to have a really great support system of family and friends who encouraged her along her way. And Laura, I feel weird talking about you when you're sitting right in front of me, but I'm just going to continue.
It's okay.
Reading this. But to say the least, she mentions that survivorship was not as easy as she had imagined. So she also had feelings of feeling lost and lonely and confused. But she eventually realized that listening to her body and focusing on her own abilities, she could become more resilient step by step. So she believes that each one of us can achieve more through survivorship than we ever thought was possible. Laura, we are so glad to have you this evening join us, and we look forward to your discussion. So I will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, for such a lovely introduction. And I'm so grateful to be here with all of you tonight. I think you heard a little bit of my story, so when I get to that part, I won't share too much more. I'll share a little bit more of the personal side. But first and foremost, like this topic tonight is so near and dear to me as a survivor. And it's one of the biggest things that I have changed in my life after being a survivor. It's probably one of the biggest things from what my life was before cancer to what my life is after cancer that I continually focus on. And so I just want to say, I am not a doctor. I am not a sleep expert. I am a survivor like all of you that had a real challenge with something that's very fundamental to what we all need in our daily life. And one of the things I'll talk about is, as I was dealing with the lack of sleep, the elusiveness of sleep, my husband, my caregiver, and I set out to try and figure out ways to overcome that. And in that journey, we ended up developing a nonprofit, of which a lot of what were rooted in the discussion tonight, we researched and discovered. And the things that our nonprofit talk about are truly the things I hope we talk about tonight are things that you haven't heard. One of the biggest things that reason I wanted to solve or try and find a different way to sleep was there weren't any doctors giving me the tools, just asking me if I was getting sleep and and then telling me to get more sleep. So, but no one was telling me how much sleep or why or what that looked like. So those are some of the things that I hope that you all get out of tonight, is thinking differently about sleep, maybe learning some things about how you can try and do some things in your natural life to correct and mind and body together, and actually what you do during wakefulness, how that affects how you sleep at night. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. But that's kind of what we're going to do. So I just brought a few slides to kind of help guide the discussion. So let me make sure everyone can see it, and then let me put it in presentation mode. Are you guys seeing the right mode, or do I need to swap it, Jenna?
We see the presentation mode, but we see the presenter mode.
Yep.
So we see
Yep.
your notes as well. That's
Great.
okay.
Okay.
There you go. That's perfect.
Yep. I never know. Sometimes it comes up
Yeah.
one way, sometimes it comes up another. So
No, you're good.
And I know Jennifer said not to ask questions, but honestly, I prefer more of a discussion. So
Oh,
if I
yes.
say something and you're comfortable asking a question while I'm recording, I would love to answer that in the moment. And just because I often things, especially I know with my chemo brain, if I don't think it or I don't say it right away, it goes away. So if something strikes you and you do want to ask a question, I'm very open to that. So, I can't sleep, help, tips on getting rest better. That was truly my problem. Like, I came out of survivorship, and my stem cell transplant had me, when I came home from the hospital, on 50 medications on a daily basis. So transplant patients, as I've been told, leave the hospital on the most medications of any other patient that goes through anything. So I was on 50 daily meds. It put me into menopause. And so many of the things I'm sure many of you are experiencing, the elusiveness of sleep from meds, or menopause, or sweating, or just stress and in the head, right? What happened? Like, what's going on? Why can I not sleep? So many things, so normal, and really hard to overcome just by saying, I want to sleep better. So Jennifer gave a really nice opening about what my story is, but I thought I would just personalize it a little bit for you all. So at the time that I was diagnosed, it was 2018, February 2nd. Really unexpectedly. We are actually, just for context, working mom, traveled all the time. We were actually in process to move to London for 2 years, and to kind of have a different journey as a family. Our kids were 5, 4, and 2.5. We thought it'd be really great. And I took my kids to the pediatrician when I actually got off a plane from London, because they were all sick. And I was explaining to the pediatrician that this one had had a fever since this day, and this one had had this. And she looked at me point blank and said, "What's going on with you?" And I said, I think I'm getting what they're getting. I have a double ear infection. I'm pretty tired. And she said, "No, something's wrong. Your coloring doesn't look right." And that was it. She encouraged me to get some blood work done. And I had a full blood panel done the next day. And that night, my doctor called. I missed the call. And on the next morning, on February 2nd, she called again and sent me to the ER. And within 45 minutes in the ER, I found out I had leukemia and I had AML. And obviously that turned our life around in a moment. And I stayed in the hospital then for the next 7.5 weeks. Didn't see my children. Didn't see my children. Didn't really, have an idea of what was happening, but sort of left this in a place of the whole world stopped in a moment. And so one thing that when we set out to really think about how I could change, this concept of, well, if I'm feeling this, there must be a lot of other people that feel it too. And this concept really came that helped us think about what to name our nonprofit. And it's this idea of being a luminary. So a luminary is a person who inspires or influences others, especially in a prominent or particular sphere. I consider people like Karen and Jennifer luminaries, the people that do the work that they're doing every day to help those of us who have gone through these battles or are going through battles really have the tools and feel better and feel supported. And so, in my mind, just to give a real example, that's what I think of as a luminary. someone that knows how to lead or inspire others. And that's really kind of what we set out to do when we created Luminaries. The reason we created it, not only because sleep is one piece of it, is survivorship is that second part of the journey, right? When you become a survivor and you're told like you're in remission or you're done with treatment, I had this like novel idea that it was going to feel elating. And it was going to be this like, wow, I made it to the top of the mountain. And it just didn't feel like that. It felt very confusing and it felt very not really sure what to do. You know, you're over this patient journey, but everything in your life has changed. And it felt very unguided. And I wasn't always sure to have the strength to move forward. And there were a lot of things that were just so different. Sleep really being one of them, right? Like not being able to sleep, not being able to taste food the same way. Those are two very core things to what creates your daily aura and presence and how you wake up and how you feel about the day. And so, you know, we really felt like if it's not just me, and I was really given a second chance. I'm 4 years into my journey, 4.5. And I didn't have a great prognosis. My prognosis was a less than 15% chance of survival. And I had to find a donor, I had to get through treatment, and I had to have a transplant that took. And I'm currently very lucky to be living with, in a very healthy way, leading my children, like, and I know that there's some kind of divine intervention that has happened to put me here. And my husband and I both felt that way and felt that that was an important part of giving back, was how do we figure out how to use our second chance? And how do we use the things that we were learning to do that? So I promise I won't talk about Luminaries the whole time, but the reason I'm doing a little bit more of a preamble to it is it truly is what led us through the research to what we're going to really talk about with sleep and rest. And I also think it's a really important topic that I'm sure you all talk about, but to think about self-care in general. You know, I think a survivor, sometimes it's very hard. You feel oftentimes maybe if you, towards your caregiver or towards any of your friends or people that maybe you've already taken so much, they've taken care of you. You've worked so hard to get through treatment. You just sort of want it to all go away, right? You don't really necessarily want to have to rebuild, right? Like who wants to go through all of that? But it truly is the key to how you think about life as you're going through and being a survivor, right? So survivorship truly starts at the point of diagnosis, and then you believe that you're a survivor, and it carries through no matter where you are. If you're living with cancer or if you're living with having had cancer, you are a survivor. And that is how the medical community looks at it. And that's a really important distinction, I think, because many people think when they're going through treatment that they're not a survivor yet, but that's not actually true. And that's a big portion of the mind and body connection. And that's a lot of what Luminaries is rooted in, is how do you make better mind and body connections, and how do you use the tools within yourself to live your best life after or during or whatever stage you are at with cancer. And it, you know, it really can be simple. It doesn't have to be with all these other tools and things like that. You really do hold the tools. You just sometimes need to be guided. So Luminaries is a 12-month program that's based on 6 different practices that is all around habit building. And habit building is how do you do or make a small change in your daily life every day to think about how then that adds up to lasting change over time. I know as a survivor, I felt very overwhelmed by the daily tasks that I dealt with. And so we were very focused on making sure anything we put into a program that was to help survivors live their best life was meant to be in small doses. And so there's actually 2 ways you can change your brain and the what they call the neuroplasticity of it. So how your brain thinks about things differently over time. One is through a catastrophic event, which most of us have been through. As a survivor, as a caregiver, if you've heard the words "you have cancer," that's a catastrophic event, and that creates memories and it creates lasting images in your mind and body. Or by making small changes over time in the form of habits or practices or however you want to think about that. So we deliver in home because one of the most important things as you're living as a survivor is how are you doing things that you can incorporate into your own life? So what are the things that you don't necessarily have to go to a group for, or always, there are wonderful times that you can go to a group, but there are many people that don't have access to those types of things. And I don't know where all of you live, but many of you might be living in an area where you don't have access to a survivorship clinic or an amazing organization like this in your local chapter, right? There are many people that affiliate, I'm sure as many you do with the Chicago chapter, but don't have access to be able to meet in person. And so Luminaries is there to say, we show up with you every day in your daily life. And so that's really the basis of it. We do focus a little bit more on like the socioeconomic and disadvantaged, making sure that there's a lot of health equity because there isn't, as many of you might know, in cancer and things like that. Hold on, got the spinning wheel. The computer's doing that. So, I mean, that's just really a little bit of our focus, but I want to get to the next page because it has a lot of great vision, like kind of ideas of how we think about the tools. And we're going to talk a little bit about tools tonight. And these are tools that come with our boxes. And this is some of what the program looks like. And Jennifer or Karen can share afterwards if it's a free program for all survivors that Karen and I have talked about a lot of ways that we might be able to integrate a little bit more and things like that. But as you can see here, these are very simple tools. And these are, tangible tools that we use for the different practices of Luminaries, which are sleep and rest and gratitude and fuel, not what you're eating, but how are you creating an environment with healthy choices, movement, breath, and hydration. And what we're going to talk about tonight are actually the things that don't even require tools like this. We're going to talk about tools of things you can do just in your daily life, between how you think about setting what we're going to talk about of your circadian clock and why that's important. And you don't even need these tools to do that. In our sleep and rest kit, we offer this is a little phone book, like a little, some of you might have gotten it if you went to Karen's retreat. It's put your phone in it. It's like a little phone sleeping bag, because self-care is truly about getting away from those digital tools, spending time with yourself, and really focusing on yourself. And then this is an eye mask that we include in the book, in the box. So I just wanted to give a little bit more of a preamble of like what you're going to see from us tonight is really rooted in the science behind why these types of habit building mechanisms are so important for how you grow and you rebuild in survivorship. And tonight we're going to take it down to really focusing on the things that we've experienced and researched around sleep and rest. I'll pause there to say if there's any questions or anything that anyone wants to ask up to this point. Otherwise, I can keep going. Okay. Don't be shy. Yeah, go ahead, Eileen. Yeah. Go ahead, whoever. Janet, hi.
Hi, I'm sorry. We kept clicking the wrong button. Are you sleeping better now?
I am sleeping much better. And actually, one of the things we're going to talk about is how you set your circadian clock and setting your, so if you don't set your circadian clock is your 24-hour body cycle. And so it's the cycle of what happens in your mind and body when you wake up, what you do during the day, and then when you sleep at night. And there is a very particular way that your body does that. And there is an amount of sleep that your body needs based on where you are in your life, based on what you've been through, and based on your age, based on a lot of things. We all sort of, go ahead, yeah.
So you would say everybody has a different clock.
Everyone has a different clock. And actually, one of the things that really affects clocks is, think about if any of you have ever had kids, your kids, when they're younger, have a very different sleeping pattern than they do when they're teens. Then they have a very sleeping pattern than they do when maybe they're young adults. And that's a really good example of, people say about their teenagers, how can they sleep till noon, right? It's just a different way that in that space and that time, their body is adjusting and needing. I specifically, just to be a little bit more specific about your question, I did the exercise of setting my circadian clock, and we'll talk in a minute about how simple it is. And I realized that after cancer, as I became a survivor, I needed much more sleep than I did before. Now, I'd really never gone through this exercise, and I had been a really busy working mom, I have 3 kids, and I'd always thought, and I was an athlete growing up, I always had early morning swim practice. So I think I always thought I did fine on maybe 7 hours of sleep, 8 if I was lucky, but I could go on 6 or 7. And afterwards, when I went through this exercise of setting my circadian clock, I found out that I felt best with 9 hours of sleep. And with those 9 hours of sleep, which is the biggest thing, as I said in the beginning, if I don't do anything else from the Luminaries journey on a daily basis, I focus on my sleep and trying to come as close to 9 hours of sleep as possible. And it has helped me really release the guilt about, excusing myself from the holiday dinner table, or telling a friend that I've just had too long of a week and I don't think I can go out tonight for dinner, or, telling my husband I really need to go upstairs now, and like, can you do the kids tonight? Because I really need the sleep. And once I did that, I felt a lot lighter about how to think about not trying to do too much. So I really focus, and it doesn't happen all the time, trust me, but I really try and focus to get close to 9 hours of sleep a night. And if that means that I don't get to work out and do my yoga before I run off to work, okay, because I didn't get to bed earlier enough, or I really, 8 is for sure my baseline, but I try and get closer to 9 if possible.
Well, because what you said resonates with me. Now, my kids are old and gone out of the house. And I'm struggling with a new occurrence of ovarian cancer. And I'm sorry if you can hear my dogs barking, they're barking at my, but I say I gotta work out an hour every morning. I gotta take the dogs for 2 walks a day. I work full time, and I'm like, so I'm committed to all those things. And sometimes I'm reading a book on the couch. I'm like, I just want to read one more chapter. And then I look up and it's 10:30, but then I'm getting up at 5:30 again in the morning. And I started a new chemo today, and they're like, you have to remember to get rest, but don't forget, don't rest too much because you got to keep moving. And so like, what's too much?
So here is the exercise of how you determine what your circadian clock is. It's super simple. You go to sleep when you're tired, and you wake up when you wake up. Now that isn't ideal if you have to be up for a job or things like that, but maybe try it on a weekend and see, every weekend, try it for 2 days of the weekend and see, when am I going to sleep and when am I getting up? So no alarms, and start to see what that pattern looks like and kind of write it down, take note of it. How many hours did you sleep? Do you feel refreshed? Do you not? Did you sleep 2 more hours than you normally do because you didn't set an alarm and you didn't put any pressure on yourself to get up to work out or take the dogs for a walk, right? Like, take that pressure out and say, this weekend, I'm just going to go to sleep when I'm tired. So if that means you're reading your book till 10:30, read your book till 10:30 if you're not tired, and then go to sleep, because maybe you're a little bit more of a night owl than you realize. But if you are, or if you realize that you do need, let's call it 8 hours of sleep, then that's when you need, so if you decide that's what it is, that's when you're going to have to adjust something in the schedule. So if you're getting up at 5:30, and that's the hard part of, like, you have to get up at 5:30 and there's no changing that because of work, then you're going to have to change something on the front end of that cycle, right? You're going to have to say, okay, I can't read every night, or I got to only read this. I can't read the extra half hour because otherwise I'm going to be gypping myself of sleep every night. So it's truly an exercise of understanding what your body needs. There is a natural cycle. And it's your body gets out of that natural cycle when you travel and things like that. But if you know what that is and you try and get back to it, it'll naturally fall into that. And that is a really important part of getting restful sleep. And the reason being is there's a few things we'll talk about like lightness and dark, and how that affects, like, the things you eat, when you exercise. Those things all affect the mind and body connection, and they affect your sleep cycle. So when I was saying earlier, what you do in your wakefulness actually has a huge effect on how you sleep at night even if you're not trying to go to sleep at a certain time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Eileen, you look like you came off mute for a second. Did you have any questions? Okay. So I wanted to talk, but feel free if you do, holler at me. I wanted to talk for a few minutes, just like why sleep is so important. And we're just going to stay on the screen for a minute, but sleep really heals us. And it is one of those things that the more sleep you have, the better your brain works. We focus a lot on the treatment itself, but there's a lot of things that happen in your body that if you're not sleeping, you're not producing something called cytokines, and they're things that actually help you have a better immune response to any treatment or to any infection or to anything you're going through. And so, it really is important to recharge yourself at night, and to really understand the value that sleep has. I think historically, our society has not put as much value on sleep. I think society is getting a lot better about that, right? A lot better about mental health, a lot better about self-care, a lot better about exercise, about all these things, but sleep was never really talked about in a way it probably should have, for how incredibly important it is to the body, the immune system, which we all know is really important to being a survivor. And so, yes, what you eat is important and things like that, but sleep truly is what heals you from the inside out and gives you that energy that you might not have or get from other things. So that's a little bit of like, we talked a little bit about that circadian clock, the natural cycle of it. So I'm looking over here, but I realize I look a little weird. So let me look straight ahead if that's easier.
You're fine. You're fine.
Okay. But your circadian clock is just that 24-hour body cycle. And it's kind of often referred to as your body clock. And it's really that rhythm that controls what time of the day you are most alert, most hungry, tired, physically ready to go or not. And it's, actually not really just unique to humans, right? Pretty much every living being on the planet has a circadian clock, and there's a regulation that you can that works on that. It has to do with like your metabolic functions, and it helps control like how you sleep, your body temperature, digestion, and all those other things that we sort of take for granted, right? We just think if I eat protein, then things are going to be better, but they actually all work in tandem together. And they don't actually work well if you don't have them all together. So many things can disrupt the body clock. Obviously, medications, treatment, stress, things that any of those things that most of us have gone through or you are currently going through really is what makes sleep so elusive, and why it's so important to go through this exercise. So I really, we talked a little bit about it a minute ago, but like, it's truly about going to sleep when you're tired and waking back up, and then understanding after, a week is ideal, but if that means you do it on a weekend and you do it for 4 weekends in a row, start to understand what that looks like. Many people have a set idea of what they are. Oh, I'm a night owl, or I'm a morning person. And I was very much a morning person before my leukemia. I still love the morning, but I don't operate the same way as I used to in the morning. Like, I am not as alert. That's getting better with a lot of the things that I've done to change that, but my things just don't operate the same way. And I just need a little, like, I've added more sleep to the back end of my cycle to adjust for that. So, sleep is really, truly like, it helps your brain and your body connect more. It helps you, oftentimes many people talk about, well, I'm more hungry when I'm tired. And that's a thing. That's a scientifically proven thing. That is a cue that your body takes into account of you didn't sleep well enough. And now there's something that's missing in that mind and body connection. And it kind of gives you that cue that you're going to eat because you're missing something else. So we're going to talk a little bit about, that's truly, sleep is probably the most important thing when we, at least in Luminaries, when we start to research a lot of the different things that were tough for me, sleep there's a reason why it's our first practice, is because it's truly the foundation of all the other things you can do. So gratitude is the second practice, but you can't really have gratitude for anything if you're not sleeping, because that's real hard to be tired and trying to see the best side of things. You're not going to eat well if you're not sleeping. You're not going to have focus if you're not sleeping. You're not going to be able to exercise and move in the way you should if you're not sleeping. You're seeing the pattern here, right? So sleep is truly that first thing.
That's so true. And Laura, if you don't mind if I interject with a question.
Yeah, I'd love.
Is, there's such a negative, well, it seems that there's such a negative connotation sometimes to sleep. Like, you're weak, or, you're not doing enough in the world. So I think we have to, and I don't know if you're going to speak to this, but get over that. At least maybe I'm just talking about myself, but get over that, negative perception of I need to sleep, because I agree with what you're saying. It's such a healing process. And I don't think a lot of us think of it as sleep as healing part of our journey. So I appreciate you saying that.
I think I know that's a great point. And I think the other reason, at least I know, and I'll just speak personally, but I think as I've talked to other survivors, I know they feel the same, especially if you have many things going on in your life. Because when you're going through treatment, especially like when you're really in it, or you're in your chemo month or week, you end up resting a lot more than you would like, and it feels a little defeating. So I think as a survivor, the idea that like I need to sleep more, or I need to sleep different, like I need to get more sleep in order to feel better, feels almost defeating, because you're like, well, that's what I feel like I do all the time. And now I just want to be out there with my kids, or I just want to take a walk with my partner, or I just want to go to that girls' dinner that I got invited to. I'm not going to, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to sleep. But you're truly right. We have to relieve ourselves of that, and really remember sleep is so healing, and you're not going to be able to do those things if you don't find out how to make those choices and find the right amount of sleep for your body. Any other thoughts? Didn't like that. It beeped at me. Oh my goodness. Hold on. Let me advance. Okay. So we're going to talk just for a minute. This comes to a little bit of those levers and tools that you can leverage or think about and start to pay attention to that don't actually have anything to do with a sleeping pill, or, there's lots of people that think about other things that they need to sleep, but these are some of the levers and tools. And then we're going to talk specifically about two things, one related to light and one related to a couple of these digital tools here that I've really incorporated into my life, that I try to do almost every day. But some of this might be interesting, but light and dark, and the way you wake up your brain, the way you put it to sleep, and the effect of certain types of light on your brain has a huge effect on that cycle and how you sleep. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Temperature has a big effect, and we'll talk a little bit about what we mean by that, of like, if your body actually is cooling, when you cool down at night, the ideal is that your body's cooling down several different degrees. And if you're too hot at night, that's why you're going to wake up. It usually isn't if you're too cold, but it's usually you want like a cool sleeping environment and things like that. And being too hot, having too many blankets, those types of things, having your core body temperature too high from potentially exercise or something before bed is all going to affect your natural cycle when you fall asleep. Food, what and when you eat, how full you are before bed. It's really hard to sleep when have too much in your system and you're not metabolizing that. That has a huge effect. Exercise is so good, right? You heard that from Janet. Don't sit too much. Don't get too much rest, because you need to be moving. And we really talk about movement at Luminaries, not necessarily exercise, because there's so many different ways to think about movement. But exercise and movement raises your body temperature. It raises that kind of dopamine and things. And so exercising too close to when you potentially want to go to sleep actually makes it a lot harder for your body to relax and go to sleep. Which not everyone realizes, because you think, well, it's just important to get exercise in at any point or movement in at any point of the day. But there is some, exercising in the first half of your day is the ideal, because then you're also using that energy for the second half of the day. And there's 3 kind of different critical time frames. And like the middle of the day, that second time frame really kind of ends at 4. And then everything you do after 4 p.m. has an effect on how your body is preparing for sleep later in your third kind of time frame. So food as a tool is kind of like, just going back to food for a second, like if the earlier you eat in the day, you kind of start that biological clock of when you want to eat and how your metabolism moves. And that actually starts that whole cycle to how you then metabolize food closer to like dinner time, and how that affects how your body then is relaxed and goes to sleep. Caffeine, this one's probably not one for everyone that's surprising, but one thing that is surprising to me is caffeine, of course, you shouldn't have late at night. The interesting thing is you will find people that come and say, well, I can have an espresso at 6 p.m. and fall asleep. And there are people that can do that. My husband's like that. But what the research and the science shows is that your body actually, even if you can fall asleep, you're not sleeping in the most natural and best way. So you're not getting the best sleep. Alcohol has the same effect. Even if some people, have a few glasses of wine and it, they kind of feel sleepy and it makes them fall asleep, you're actually not getting restorative sleep when you drink those things. So that's kind of 2 different ways to think about sleep. There's one thing about falling asleep, which many of us have that challenge. There's one thing about staying asleep, but the other thing is about, let's say you are staying asleep, are you getting enough of the right sleep? And that's what a lot of these things affect. I'm not going to talk about supplements tonight, but there are like 8 supplements that are focused on like magnesium, some different kind of ways that you can think about that. The reason I'm not going to talk too much about that is I think those are very individualized to what your health plan is and what makes most sense. But there are definitely things you can ask your doctor about that are more natural kind of ways to fall asleep. And then I'm going to come back to light, and we're going to talk about digital tools like Yoga Nidra in a little bit more depth, because they're both really interesting and are 2 of the things that I incorporate into my day all the time now. Any kind of questions? Does anything on this page go, wait, what? It's kind of like so surprising to see up there, besides maybe light and dark. So let's talk a little bit about light. So, light is truly about, we talk a lot, and so about kind of how you wake your brain up, and at what point do you get natural light into your eyes versus unnatural light, like lights or the phone, very, very unnatural light. And so there's a lot of scientific research about the power of how you wake your brain up naturally by getting 5 to 10 minutes of sunlight within 30 to 60 minutes of waking in the morning. So what we kind of termed it at Luminaries is sunlight before screen light. So this is a simple thing that I do every single day. I do not look at my phone when I get up. I put on my bathrobe, I go downstairs, I put it in my pocket, and I very consistently and deliberately make a cup of coffee, because even though they say caffeine should, for the best amount of sleep, you should not have it for 90 minutes after waking. That is not possible in my life. So caffeine is the first thing we do, only because I really enjoy the moment, and I have like this affiliation to how I feel very happy when I'm making my cup of coffee in the morning, which is a lot of gratitude. But I take that outside, even in my crazy world of like you were saying, Janet, The dog's got to go out. Someone's got to get fed. The kids have this. It was picture day today, right? Like I was running out the door to catch a train. Like I find 5 minutes to go outside and sit on my front porch and get light. It has now turned into a point where I set my intention for the day. I pray for things, but the light turns on cortisol in your brain that naturally kind of wakes your brain up and gets you ready for the day. There's something about sunlight that does this very naturally. What's interesting is sunlight at the end of the day, like a sunset, actually then signals, because of the way the sun is, it signals to your brain that it's actually time to think about winding down later, because the sun is different and your brain and your body actually knows that. So that comes down to like the dark and at night. There is a lot of science that says artificial light in that after 5 p.m. affects how naturally you might be able to fall asleep. So if it's possible, dim some lights in your house. Take, maybe we don't need all the lights on. Of course, phone before bed, computer before bed, not ideal. That's like a blue light, and that's a colored light that's now kind of doing the opposite of what you want your brain to think. TV, not ideal, but hey, we all need it sometimes, right? This is just, what we're talking about tonight is the ideal state of things to think about that you have the ability to make choices around, right? And you're not like we talk about, and I think about, especially in my life, progress, not perfection. That you didn't used to be what I was, right? I was all about like, got to do it right every day, got to be this and that. And now it's like, I give myself a lot more grace. I don't hit all these things every day, but sunlight before screen light is a ritual that I make a priority every single day. Just to go back to the temperature thing, because I think this one's really interesting. So we talk a little bit about, you want to actually raise your core body temperature as you're waking up, because that raises your cortisol levels and it gets you kind of ready for the day. And then you want to cool it down at night. What's really interesting about the science here that is totally counterintuitive is that if you take a cold shower in the morning, or you splash cold water on your face and things like that, you're actually going to warm your body up, because what your body's doing on the inside is it's reacting to the cold water. So if you've ever taken a cold shower or sprayed it on your face in the morning, it wakes you up. And that is actually what's happening. Your body is raising in body temperature to fend off the cold that you're having. Same thing happens at night. A hot bath, a hot shower, and then your body is cooling down because there's too much heat, and it's trying to say, hold on, I need to cool in order to not take on too much heat and let my temperature rise. So you've heard, take a hot bath to relax. That actually is a natural way to think about moving your body into that very natural and restful sleep cycle. And then the other one I want to talk about is these kind of like, some people call it mindfulness, but it's really these non-sleep kind of resting tools. And one that I like a lot that I'd never heard of until we started, really researching how I could sleep better. And then we developed it into our Luminaries program, is called Yoga Nidra. Not sure if anyone's ever heard of Yoga Nidra, but this is really like, the science behind this is that you can actually rest your mind, which in turn rests your body without fully falling asleep. So what's really amazing about Yoga Nidra is that you can do this in the middle of the day, and it can replace a nap, which oftentimes needs to be very well timed to when you're awake, when you're sleeping, when you've had caffeine, like not having a nap too late in the day so you can't sleep. So Yoga Nidra, because it's not fully putting you to sleep, although at night, if you do it, it's okay if you fall asleep, you're still going to get the same effects. What you're doing is you're actually like, you're resting your body and putting it into this full state of restfulness without actually having to fall into a deep sleep. And so Yoga Nidra is, the greatest thing about it is you can do it anywhere. You don't need any tools but yourself, and then a guided script. And there are, if you go on YouTube, you go anywhere, or if you Google Yoga Nidra, it'll come up with an entire screen full of different scripts. And what Yoga Nidra is simply, you can sit, you can lie. I enjoy doing it lying down. It's closing your eyes, and it's a guided script of taking you through thinking about relaxing different points of your body. And it kind of goes through from every little piece from the top to the body to your toes. And it takes you through that relaxation of that and truly puts you into the state of restorefulness. And you can do it for 5 minutes. You can do it for 20 minutes. You can do it for an hour. When I need a moment in the afternoon, I have laid down in my office and I have done it for 20 minutes, and it's amazing how I feel afterwards. You feel this almost like you've just woken up from the most amazing night's sleep. I have done it where I really tried was I would put one on before bed. If you've ever tried a sleep story, it can be similar to that, but this is very focused on you putting your body to sleep and putting kind of a sensory moment into different pieces of your body, and it truly relaxes your whole body. So these are just tools and levers that maybe you've never thought of, maybe you've never heard of, but ways that there is science that talks about, if you think about some of the things we've done tonight around these different areas, and I'll be happy to send this out. So if you just want to go back and then Google light and sleep and read a little bit more about it, there's a lot more out there about what we're talking about tonight. But on this page, my two favorite things are really sunlight before screen light and the tool of Yoga Nidra. And then we just had whenever, these are just some tips. And so that's why, again, I will send this out. But, this is a little bit of what I just talked about. But view sunlight, 30, 60 minutes of waking, getting it through a window is not actually as good. It doesn't have the same effect. You can still do it on a cloudy day. You just sometimes need, instead of 5 or 10, maybe 15 or 20 minutes. You can do it on a rainy day. Maybe you just need a little longer. I also say, if you do it for us, if you have 2 minutes, that's great, right? Like sometimes it's just about doing it, right? And then the second tip is about the circadian clock cycle that we talked about. Really trying to avoid caffeine in the afternoon. If you can, it really has such a major effect on that natural sleep cycle. Avoid viewing the bright lights like the phone or big overhead lights. It's really great if you're coming up and you're winding down and you want to read a book in your room, or you're getting ready for bed. Like maybe you don't need the overhead light on, right? Maybe you just have the light on next to your bed. And, that's where it's not about having to do all these things. It's what was interesting to you tonight, and try that for a couple of nights. See if you feel any different, right? It's truly about making small changes and seeing how you feel. This one is, making your naps less than 90 minutes if possible. Obviously not on a rough day, not on a chemo day, like we've all been there. But I also, love the idea of, not napping and trying things like Yoga Nidra or other things like that. If you wake up in the middle of the night, consider a Yoga Nidra. If you can't fall back asleep, I've done that too. When you wake up, and if you wake up because of your temperature, things like that, and you can't turn the head off, I've been there. I try doing a Yoga Nidra script because that naturally just focuses your mind somewhere else, and it starts to get your body to relax. Oh, sorry, I moved these around. Sorry, there's a little, but this is about keeping your room cooler, like we talked about. Not drinking alcohol before sleep if you can avoid it. I'll be the first to admit I have a glass of wine here and there. And then your needs change over time. So this is a little bit of what we talked about in the beginning when Janet asked that great question of how much sleep do you need? And that happens. Everything changes over time. And that's where setting your circadian clock and really understanding what your body needs now versus what it might have needed before is really important.
And Laura, on number 6, is NSDR the same thing as Yoga Nidra? Or?
Yeah, sorry, it's like a non-sleep. It's like it's the same thing as thinking about something that doesn't require like a sleeping pill or supplement, a more natural way to think about putting your body and your mind to sleep and in the
Got it.
same place. So
And then
that
I know,
yeah.
sorry.
No, go ahead. No, I was gonna say that's a really like most of the things that I wanted to talk about. Hopefully there's some things in here that maybe spur some questions and we can have some discussion, or maybe there's one thing that you went, huh, I've never thought of that before. Because I know when I was looking for things, that's definitely what I felt. And I'll just say again, it's about trying something and seeing what happens, right? It doesn't have to be all these things at once. These are just different levers that you have in your toolbook to think about how you put your sleep self to into a more natural state of sleep. One thing I will say, I have an Apple Watch and I never slept with it before. There's many different watches that can do this, but I sleep with it and I track my sleep. And I now can tell when I have, how many hours of deep sleep I have. It also talks to you about what your body temperature was by your heart rate. It talks to you about how you were, it shows you when you were awake and things like that. There are many apps for that. Mine, I use something called Auto Sleep. And who knows, if it's really good for you to wear your watch on your hand all the time, but I am really intrigued. Also, it helps me understand, was I more stressed? Did I not kind of follow my thing? Did I not get sunlight before screen light? And did I not get any deep sleep? I mean, the alcohol thing for sure. Like if you have a couple glasses of wine, the deep sleep is like almost zero. And deep sleep is when you're really going into that restorative cycle. So just something to think about is that there's a lot of apps out there that if you do have some kind of watch, that can also help aid you in how you're thinking about if you're getting good sleep or not, once you're starting to sleep more through the night. Janet, you came off, you came live again. So I feel like you have a question for me.
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you so much, because I picked up quite a few little things that I didn't realize. And my neighbor recently cut down a pine tree that was between our yards. And my room's been so lit up lately because their security lights are on all the time. And the tree always blocked it. So now they're gone. And I go in my room, I'm like, I just wasn't picking up on, I don't have a dark space any longer. So I will have to resolve that. And my house is freezing cold all the time just because it's a really old brick house. But I hate to bring out the big winter blankets. And, sometimes I'm just clueless. Like, number 8, put on blankets you can remove easily.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to bring out the winter wool. Just bring a nice little blanket and I can take it off. Like,
you can always have more, right? But like the other thing that I've learned, and this was really interesting when I listened to a podcast one time about this, is like, if you have blankets on, but you're in a cool environment, if you're a little hot, your body's going to kind of put its arm out first or put its foot out first. And that's where it like tests the water naturally while you're sleeping. And if your room is hot, then that's what's going to wake you up, because now there's no relief, right? And it's still too hot. If your room's cooler, that might just be enough that your body doesn't need to actually fully wake up. A little out of the blanket is okay because the room's cool. So my husband was loving this because we're in that phase right now of like the summer to fall, or where we don't turn the heat on until it's like maybe 50 in the house, right? Like if we wake up in the morning and it's under 60, I'm like, are we finally allowed to turn the heat on? He normally just says, put on a sweatshirt, get a blanket. So he's kind of winning here of like the cooler the house, the better the sleep, much to my dismay, but it is true. So you can always take blankets off, but you can't in the middle of the night make your room immediately cooler.
Well, right, and it's such a logical thing. Instead, I just am shivering and just keep burrowing deeper and deeper. And like, just get off your butt and go put an extra blanket on. We don't have to make it a big deal about, I'm not ready to put the heat on yet. So thank you very much, Laura.
Well, I'm
Appreciate
so
it.
glad. Thank you for the questions, and I hope others are feeling the same. And like I said, I'm just a survivor that has done a lot of research and found a lot of the things that I learned about sleep and rest were things I'd never heard of and never actually thought of in how to get better sleep.
Yes, anyone feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions to Laura, or again, put them in the chat and we can read them aloud.
Hey, I actually have a question.
Yeah.
I won this alarm clock from my work. I haven't tried it yet. I don't know what your thoughts are on it. It's a smart sleep alarm where it like has natural colored sunrise and sunset to help you fall
Oh.
asleep, wake up.
I've seen those.
I have seen those. I have heard about those. I've heard that, I mean, there are, so one of the podcasts and one of the scientists I listen to, his name is Dr. Huberman, and he does a podcast called the Huberman Lab, and he talks about so many things in the mind and body. And it's really fascinating. And he does talk about when you listen to talking about light and dark and the effect of that to sleep, he does say that there are tools like that. And I think what you would want to just look and research is potentially like maybe anything you see on the internet about how good that one is, right? So, because there are probably a lot of gimmicks out there, but he does say that there are some really good tools like that, but nothing is as good as the actual sunrise and the actual sunset. But we don't all live in places where you can get that. And so that's what he does talk about in the science of biology is like, but then there are also other places where you have to, supplement. And so I think my thought would be try it. See if it, now that you kind of are here listening to, there is some value in how you think about those things, start using it and see if you feel better. See if you feel differently. Do you feel more rested? Do you feel more relaxed when you're going to bed? With a lot of those things, I think try it. That's amazing that you won that from work or that it was given to you from work. I love that.
Okay, yeah. I'll go ahead and try it then. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I would say that I've learned a lot of is your mind is put on notice to make change and actually remembers things when you write things down. So when you actually take the time to write something down, your mind goes on notice that that's important. And this is how you create more of that natural connection between mind and body. This is why in a gratitude practice, when you write 3 things down at the end of the day or in the beginning of the day that you're grateful for, it starts to naturally make your mind have gratitude over time for just the way things are in your life. The same thing goes with if you use that and then you start to just write a couple of things. I mean, it can just be something next to your bed that you're like, wow, I felt good today, or I felt a little bit more pep in my step, right? Or I felt really rested, or wow, that didn't really do anything. Whatever that is, if you write some things down, you naturally will retain that feeling without even trying better.
We did have a question, Laura, that came in earlier in your presentation when you were speaking about food. And this person is asking, how can you eat dinner before 4 p.m. when you don't get home from work until 6 and have a family to feed?
So that's a great question. And let me be clear, you do not need to eat before 4 p.m. Okay. Yes.
I would never make it.
No, I'd never make it either. 4 p.m. I'm like, am I having a snack? Right? Like, I mean, family to feed dinner. I'm usually the last one that gets to sit at the table. So I hear you. No, it's not about that. It's, thinking a little bit more about the effect that how much food that you put into your body does have. So let's take a different point of the day. If you have a huge breakfast, there's a good chance you're going to feel a little sleepy after that, right? So it's not that you shouldn't eat at certain points of the day. It's how much are you putting in at one time? What type of food are you putting in? How are you, those types of things. So, after Thanksgiving dinner, everyone talks about being in a food coma, right? And you would then think how sleepy you feel, right? Now, of course, they say turkey has a natural like sleeping, hormone or whatever in it, but it also has to do with your body is very tired from having to try and metabolize all of that food. So that's more just something to think about of maybe dinner's not your biggest meal of the day, or maybe it's, if you're not eating till 7, which is fine, maybe it's just a slightly smaller meal. So your body's not having to work to do that when 3 hours later, or whatever that time is for you, you're now trying to put yourself to sleep and your body's working to do something else. So it's truly just something to think about. It's not necessarily that you can't eat dinner. It's how much food, what type of food are you putting in, and where is that in relation to when you're thinking about sleeping?
That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. Thanks for explaining that.
Of course.
We do have another question here. I rarely sleep through the night, and when I do wake up in the middle of the night, it takes, as you can imagine, some time to get back to sleep. In this case, how would you check your circadian rhythm?
Great call. Great question. So waking up is actually normal, right? So to wake up once, maybe twice, the challenge is you're waking up and not falling back asleep, right? So that's where you're probably needing, there's other things going on, maybe some of these other things on this screen, right? But that's where you'll need to say, okay, if you were up for an hour, let's take the hour out of the total time that you slept, right? Because you actually didn't sleep in that hour. But this is where I'd also think about a yoga nidra or listening to a sleep story or something that is helping you is helping you naturally try and fall back asleep and shorten that amount of time that you're up. But what I would do is if it's not just an up to go to the bathroom, or it's just not an up to readjust or go get a blanket, Janet, or something like that. If it's more than that and it's really truly you can't sleep, I would take that time off and not count that as an hour, because you're not really sleeping. Your body isn't restoring at that moment. Does that make sense? So if it's 10 hours that you went to sleep and woke up, but there were 2 hours, whether that be from 1 to 2 in the morning and 3 to 4 in the morning that you weren't sleeping, I would say that was an 8-hour sleep cycle.
Okay. We did have quite a few also, Laura, and I know that we're running up against our time here tonight, but I think these questions are so good. If y'all are willing to stay on, feel free. But a few people have asked about some of those supplements, if you might be able to just kind of go over a few. As you can imagine, that's a hot topic. But I know that you mentioned earlier that everything is so individualized and to really talk with your doctor. But if there's a few you want to touch on.
Yeah, I mean, this is something where I can also follow up a little bit more and maybe give you more of a list of like what the supplement is and what I've learned to be why it's important. I know like magnesium 3 is something that they say naturally can help depending on what's going on in your body, right? Because this is again where I come back to like after my transplant, I needed magnesium every week. So like not sure what I'm getting from a magnesium infusion or a magnesium supplement should have been put together, right? And I wasn't doing that. But there are different types of supplements that feed different levels in your body that can have an effect on how you sleep. So what I'd love to do, if it's okay with you, I'd love to write something up for you and then follow up, just so I can be a little bit more clear and also a little bit more prescriptive of where maybe why you need to ask and why you need to think about it. But I'd love to follow up if that's okay.
Oh, sure. That'd be great. And then we could just send it out to everyone. That'd be awesome. That'd be great.
I'll take that as
another great question was, what about sleepy time tea? Those teas that you can, that advertise to help you sleep better. Do you have any thoughts about those?
Yeah, no, I definitely, I mean, that to me goes a little bit along with, those are things that some of it is about relaxation, but that goes along with the core body temperature, right? So you're doing something that heats up your body, which now the internal temperature of your body is going to cool down to try and, counteract that. And so that's why, tea at night is so relieving and can be so soothing. same thing as like a bath or a hot shower. And so it is actually having, sorry, you can hear my dog in the background. Apologies. She's probably barking at the deer or the coyotes or something outside. So, and I have 3 kids out there that are not taking any, doing anything about that, but
I don't hear anything, so you're good.
okay. I'm a huge fan of decaffeinated tea at bedtime for a couple of reasons. One, it always seems to relax my body. I had learned the temperature side to it, and I naturally find myself being more relaxed. And when I have a cup of tea before bed, and I don't do it every night, but I do look forward to it, especially in the winter. And it sort of just puts me in that mindset as well of feeling sleepy. So decaf is the way I go. Sleepy time tea, or if you've ever heard of David's tea, they have fabulous teas. Like some of the best I've ever had. They have loose leaf and packet tea, but just the Forever Nuts is my favorite. It has the most amazing overall, just kind of like great flavor with a little honey in it.
Oh, sounds good.
Teach you all my little tricks.
Sounds really good. We have a comment too, talking about how her sleep every night is waking up at least twice, sometimes 3 times, and up for 15 to 20 minutes each time. She also has a sleep watch, or a watch that tracks her sleep, and she gets a grade of fair, but she works full time, so she really needs her sleep. So yeah, I think we can all relate to that and appreciate that comment very much.
Very much. And you know what will be really interesting is try a couple of these things. Try one thing, see if it changes. Try putting on a 5-minute yoga nidra script when you wake up and can't fall back asleep, and see if you fall back asleep in 10 minutes instead of 20. And then see if you get something better than a fair. Because I get a fair very often, even if what's interesting is there's so many, I think that's just what's really interesting. You could have and you can set goals. And so I set my 9-hour sleep goal. I think I set it's adjusted a 3-hour deep sleep goal. So you could hit those goals and still get not an optimal output, because maybe your temperature didn't adjust the way it should for all things to be firing on all cylinders for your body to have the most optimal sleep. But I would say try one of these techniques like a yoga nidra or listening to something to see if that just shortens the amount of time that you're up.
And
then
I think, no, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, and some of these other things, like the type of light you have, the temperature you have, those things affect if you're waking up or not. And so the temperature has a huge effect on if you wake up or not. So kind of be mindful of what the temperature of your room is and see if you wake up once instead of twice.
I would say for me, the one huge takeaway that I took from all of your tips was the temperature. I had no idea the interesting science behind that and warming up your body to wake up and cooling your body down to go to sleep. I just thought that was so interesting.